esteemed viewers. I, Neeta, have a great pleasure in welcoming you all to a very unique experience on behalf of Cube's Career Care for those behind this event.
Good evening to all our viewers. Good evening, Abhilash. Abhilash, I can't see you.
You can't, sir.
Yeah, okay, now I can see you. Yeah. Okay, good evening, Abhilash. And very happy 72nd Republic Day to you all. A pleasure to be in this conversation with you. Never imagined, no, that when we met for the first time 10 years ago at INS Mandavi in Goa, that we will be talking to each other as veterans, retired so soon.
Absolutely, sir. It's been a nice little journey with you, 10 years. I remember being a subordinate in Mandavi. But like you say, even I couldn't have imagined that in these last 10 years, so much would have passed that we would meet again like this. But it's a pleasure to see you again, sir.
Great pleasure meeting you again. Today, the aim of today's conversation is for the audience. It's a very young audience to understand, your achievements and draw inspiration from them. Now, another aim is to understand how the beautiful ethos of the armed forces in general, the Navy in particular, which you have enjoyed for 20 years and I have enjoyed for 36 years. Your dad has enjoyed for, I think, as long as I have done it.
Sir, I've enjoyed it for 42 years.
As a naval kid.
Naval kid.
As a naval kid, yeah. Okay. And I know how, it's for the audience to figure out how all that has contributed to your life. So, let's begin. 20 years in the Navy, how has been the journey?
Actually, 24, sir, counting my training. But I would say it's been eventful. I have done so many things that I could never have imagined doing had I been outside the Navy. I've flown planes, I've sailed boats, I've been on destroyers, frigates, corvettes, tall ships, sailing boats. I've been flying planes. I've gone around the world. I don't think this would have been possible had I been in any organization outside of the Navy.
Yeah, you're very right. You were commissioned in 2000, 20 years ago. And within 6 years of that, you managed to qualify to operate from ships. You learned to fly a plane. And then you managed to get on to serious, long distance yachting too. It's all three major fields. How did the Navy let you do it? How did you manage this?
Like I said before, something like this is possible only if you're in the Navy. I'll give you a small example. The first vehicle I learned to, move around with was a cycle. The second vehicle was a sailboat. The third vehicle I could, drive myself was an aeroplane. And then I learned how to ride a bike, and then I learned how to, drive a car. In fact, I got my driving license after I learned to fly aircraft. So this sort of, this sort of an experience is only possible in the military. And I don't want to say that only I have had this experience. There are many others, I'm sure in my course, in batches before me and after me who had the same experience. And well, in addition to flying and being on ships, I picked up this hobby of sailing when I was in the Naval Academy. Now, again, that is something that I managed to nurture just because I was in the Navy, because wherever I went, there were sailing clubs and, they would welcome you with open arms. There are championships held inside the Navy to get the competitive spirit high. And it's through that club level racing, intra-Navy, inter-command, intra-Navy racing that I came up even in the sailing ranks. So I don't think that, these three qualifications in 6 years is something out of the world. If somebody has not been able to do it, then probably it's because they chose to do other things instead of sailing.
Yeah, you're right. Your first association with Sagar Parikrama, the technical Navy's name for the round the world trip, was when you gave support to Captain Donde, who went around first time. And I know he had stopped at 4 places, and you went around and gave him support. How was that experience? I mean, how did because you would fly up and down, and he would be going around in the world. How often, how long would you spend with him in those ports, and what did you gain from that?
First, I want to tell you why I got selected to be sole support. Now, that is because of some experience that I had, before joining Captain Donde. One seminal experience was sailing on Ericsson 1 from Cochin to Mumbai. Ericsson 1 was the fastest yacht in the world at that time, and they came to India for a hospitality trip. The Navy deputed me to look after them, and in return, I got a first-hand experience of how these boats are sailed. So that was a 5-day voyage. I finished that, and by the end of the year, the Navy put me in the Volvo Ocean Race for a 6-month tenure to look after 8, F1 level yachts which were racing around the world. I was managing all those 8 boats in Cochin during the Volvo Ocean Race. So I was gaining continuous experience thanks to the Navy. After this, I was deputed to Oman to sail with Sir C.V. Raman's son, Professor Radhakrishnan. I sailed from Oman. I stopped in Mukalla, and from there I continued sailing till Aden, and from there I came back. So with this level of experience, the Navy at that time was already considering this circumnavigation with stops where Captain Donde would be the skipper. They wanted a shore support, somebody who could manage his boat inshore, on shore, do the logistics, get the boat ready while he could take some time off and recuperate and all that. Captain Donde's voyage was planned solo, but with 4 stops. His first stop was in Australia, second in New Zealand, third in Falkland Islands, and fourth in Cape Town. And he finishes back in India. Well, it was a first-hand experience for me as to how a boat is supposed to be maintained, what all damages a boat can take, what all can happen to the boat, how a sailor will change through extended solitude at sea, what sort of nutrition is required for him, what are the weather that I need to consider. I got a kind of front bench experience of how to do a circumnavigation without actually doing it. And, this really held in good stead when I went for my circumnavigation. Of course, I got to sail with Captain Donde from India to Mauritius and India to Colombo, which was part of his preparation also. So in a way, I was automatically getting groomed for the next big one.
Oh, that's quite professional sounding. I mean, for a naval officer, no?
Yes, sir. On the job training.
Thereafter, you came to me, in 2010. That's when we met. You came to INS Mandvi to me with your boat, Madai. And soon, of course, you left for your Goa, Cape Town, Rio, back to Cape Town, back to Goa trip, and where you had that race also. On your return leg from Cape Town, you also did your final preparation by sailing alone for your circumnavigation trip. Now, is there anything that special that happened in that the first time you are actually coming so long alone? When Cape Town to Goa is not easy. That finally helped you, steel your resolve and go for it.
I'm glad that you asked this question, sir. Something really important happened in that leg. But before I talk about that, I have to tell you what I experienced in the legs before that. We were 4 people who started from Goa, went to Cape Town. We raced from Cape Town to Rio. At Rio, Captain Donde and one sailor got off. I became the skipper and I crossed the Atlantic and I came back to Cape Town with one guy. In all these 3 legs, I was always uncomfortable. There's a little bit of seasickness, nausea. You want to, you feel like vomiting. You don't want to work. All these things happen. The second thing is you're always looking at the destination. Because life is so uncomfortable. Either it is hot or it is too cold. You can't take bath. You can't go to the toilet properly. There is no proper food. And you're always looking at that 5-star hotel room where you will be at the end of 10, 15 days. You're always, counting your speed. Okay, I'm doing 7 knots, I'll reach in 10 days. The speed drops to 6 knots. You're like, it'll take another 2 days. And you're worried or you're happy. And there's a range of emotions, nothing to do with your present condition. But it's got only to do with the that hotel that you will reach at the end of your voyage. Things changed when I started the voyage from Rio. The change was that I became the captain. I became the skipper. So I became responsible. and suddenly all seasickness just vanished. The next experience was sailing alone. Sailing alone from Cape Town. I started from Cape Town, and soon after I started, in the next 4 days, one sail tore, one autopilot gave up. The electronic autopilots were completely misbehaving. Then the galley caught fire, the generator caught fire, and my life was a total mess. I was very angry, but I don't know at whom. I wanted to, really scream at somebody, but I had no idea whom to blame for it. I had a choice. I could come back and repair everything and go, but I didn't want to exercise that choice. I really wanted to head back to Goa and finish this voyage. And all this was happening in the middle of a storm. So suddenly I had a realization that all the problems are not in the boat. They're actually inside my head. And to get control of my, mind, I started chanting. And it was not nobody taught me to chant. I just chanted random sounds continuously for, 4 or 5 hours. And with that, my mind came under control and I sorted out all the problems one by one. And then I realized that now I'm no longer looking forward to the destination. I'm very happy in the boat. It's very uncomfortable. There is salt in your hair. Your clothes are wet. Your bunk is always wet. Food is a mess. Nothing tasty to eat. But I was very happy. And I was not looking forward to that destination. I was not looking forward to anything except being there in that boat. And I think that was one big learning which I took with me for the next big voyage around the world.
Oh, that would sound anachronistic. It was all terrible, so I loved it. Very rare to hear that. Okay, now so finally you still your resolve and you got onto the thing and you launched and we remember we watched we followed your reports from the sea and your blog and all that, and I remember watching that video of yours. Very scary one. I think we were still in Goa. Yeah, correct. We're still in Goa when you climbed the mast and the yacht was moving a lot, and you were repairing that. You were swinging and repeatedly hitting the mast, and it was really scary for us watching it on ground. Now I know if it had fallen down, you would have been separated from the boat also, and I don't know what would have happened with that. I mean, what made you decide, to do whatever you did, and what are the takeaways for life from that one incident?
Sir, I think why I did that, how that decision came about was, it's not a question of no option or it's from the training that I did. The first thing you say, sir, I think, you're not allowed to think. Sir, in my opinion, you're not allowed to have an opinion. That's how you're trained for 4 years in the Naval Academy or NDA. So this was a moment like that. I couldn't think, I couldn't have an opinion. So like you said, no choice, you have to do that. And, this is something I really did not train for. I tried it once in Harbour, but it was so difficult, I gave up even before I started. But here you have a big problem. And you have a guy who's made up his mind that come what may, I'm going to solve that problem. And I just did it. Later on, I attempted the same thing in much better weather and all. I couldn't do it because there was no problem to confront.
What would have happened if you had fallen into water?
The Southern Ocean is a very nice place. Water temperature is about 10 degrees. You can survive for 1.5 minutes. So death is quick. It won't torture you before killing you.
I remember you when you would take me around the boat first time, and you showed me as to how you're always tethered to some part of the boat, correct? As you move around on the yacht. And I suppose I remember you telling me that you never use that also. Is that really true?
It is true, sir. I found it very uncomfortable. So initially I would use it. Then I realized that, it's so uncomfortable that I'd rather fall overboard. But no, that's a joke. It was a calculated risk. Thing is, when you move from one end of the boat to the other end, if you have something to hold on to, then it's safe enough. There were times when I had to go outside the boat, behind the transom. And when I had to do that, I used to tether myself. So I used to take risks, but very calculated risks. Yeah. Of course, I remember there was a very scary day south of Cape of Good Hope. I had to go to the bow in 70 knot winds. One sail was, just dying to be ripped open and torn to bits. And I had to wear the harness, and I wore a full set of clothes to protect my body. I crawled to the bow of the boat with a knife, and I had to chop off things. That day I was tethered. So yes, it was a calculated risk I took, and when it was not warranted, I would tether myself.
Okay. And how did you prepare for these, arduous journeys, long and arduous journeys? How much of it was mental? How much was familial? That means, convincing your family at that time, your parents, and how much of it was physical, and how much was technical? Everything is involved.
So mental, not a problem, because I wanted to be alone, and I wanted to do it. So mental battle was, almost won. The problem would have been if somebody told me to do it. Like they say, detail to volunteer. If somebody had asked me to volunteer, I would have had a big problem preparing my mind. I wanted to do it, so mental was not a big issue. At the same time, I used to meditate, which used to bring perspective back, even in the worst of situations. Family, yes, my parents are very brave people, but my mother had an issue. So it took years to convince her to let me go for this voyage. The first time I was going to, Cape Town, she called me and she gave me a piece of her mind. She was shouting and screaming. And then I'll let her know that I'm not going alone. There are 4 people. And she's like, oh, okay, 4 people is fine, but this is the last time you're sailing. I said, no problem. I reached Cape Town. I said, listen, I have to go to Brazil. There is no choice. I can't fly back. So he said, okay, this is the last time you're sailing. I reached Brazil, and I told my mother, listen, I need some banana chips. I really love having banana chips in the boat. And I need some lungi to wear during this tropical crossings. So like that, I got her involved. And slowly they became a part of it. And every time I would say, this is the last time, this is the last time, this is the last time. And finally, when they came to know that I'm going for this huge circumnavigation, there was another, big eruption of emotions. And I told her, Mom, I'll come back and get married. And that convinced her. The second time I was preparing for the Golden Globe race, I did not tell anybody. My father did not know that I was building a boat. My mother did not know. In fact, they both came to know from a news article that appeared in Manorama. And my mother had just returned from church, and she opens a newspaper and it says, your son is going again for a circumnavigation.
And how much of this preparation is technical?
Technically, there's a lot to prepare. And in fact, that is one area where I did not have any let-up. Now, technical preparation involves 2 kinds of preparations: preparing the boat and preparing yourself. For every item in the boat, I would have at least 2 backups. One fails, I can't repair it, go for the second backup. That I can't repair, go for the third backup. For example, if I needed water, I had an RO plant, which converts seawater to fresh water. I had water in tanks, and I had water bottles. Now, if all these 3 failed, rainwater, if it doesn't rain, use a pressure cooker and somehow make water. So there were 5 backups. There were 2 autopilots. I knew the in and out of, all the electronics, how to repair the autopilots, the navigation computers, the satellite communication system, how to service the engine, how to service the generator, how to do carpentry work, how to do aluminum repairs, how to, cook, how to clean the toilet, how to predict weather, meteorology, oceanography. I did a course on medicine. So board preparation took almost, say, 1.5 years, where, if I suspected some part is bad, I will immediately change it. Navy supported me a lot like that. And the second part is where I prepare myself to deal with any emergency in the boat. So I underwent courses after courses on all these things: navigation, meteorology, oceanography, medicine, even editing media, how to take photographs, how to upload them, all these things. So in fact, I remember there was one TED talk I gave where 25 speakers from different walks of life were there giving lectures on their specialization. And I came to the stage and I said, I required the skill of every TED speaker who came here today.
And finally, when you went to sea in those 2 big trips that you took, how much did this help? Did you at that time think that, oh, I should have done that also or something else also?
Nothing, sir. I mean, it was the preparation was spot on. The support that I got from the Navy was spot on. I got exactly what I asked, and the Navy, accepted all my demands because they realized that I'm the most experienced person in this game. In fact, the boat was so well prepared that after 5 months, when I came back and I had to give a speech, I let it be known to everybody that you give me enough food, enough water, I'm ready to go tomorrow for one more circumnavigation.
Yeah, that's exactly like any warship or an aircraft that comes back from a sortie. You fuel up and take in spend food and water, and you say you're ready to go again.
Exactly, sir. So
your boat was
boat
like a
was,
warship.
yes, sir. Boat was very well prepared technically. There were problems, but I sorted them out. Only thing is, I lost some 20 kgs in the process. But
Which is not bad. Which is not bad.
I will recommend it as a good weight loss program.
See, you've been in the Southern Ocean. People have only heard of the Southern Ocean. Where very few people have been. And what is the experience? Because you have been mentioning about, and I have been quoting you about the garbage you found in Southern Oceans and all that. Was that place tough? And were there other tougher places that you encountered? How did you manage to overcome these terrible places?
So Southern Ocean is the second most toughest place I found in my voyage. Before I started my voyage, the only thing I knew about Southern Ocean was one adage. It said, at 40 degrees south, there are no rules. At 50 degrees south, there are no laws. At 60 degrees south, there are no gods. And at 70 degrees south, there is no common sense. So it was supposed to be bad. And I got an experience of it only when I reached there. And that's when I realized that if you're an atheist, you would wish there were a God. You would invent a God so that you had somebody to pray to. It is that sort of a place. Now, imagine you look at the coast of India, you get 1 or 2 cyclones every year. A cyclone in India is 28 knots, 30 knots. It's about 60 kmph or something. In the Southern Ocean, okay, this is once or twice every year. Maybe worst case scenario, you got 4 cyclones in a year in, say, the Arabian Sea. You go to the Southern Ocean, technically it is not called a cyclone, but you get a 30-knot wind system twice a week. You get it twice a week. And something like a super cyclone, 70, 80 knots, you get once a month very easily. On New Year's, I had 55 knots. On when I was rounding Cape Horn, next day I had 60 knots. Cape of Good Hope, I had 70 knots. So this is 70 knots is 4 times the power of a 30-knot system. Cold, it's usually 2 degrees or 1 degree. Because the wind is blowing, there is something called wind chill effect. So the temperature, apparent temperature drops down to -10, -15. No heating in the boat. Everything is wet.
Your boat didn't have heating.
No heating, no AC, nothing, sir. So you just put on whatever quilt you can put and 6 layers of clothes. I mean, imagine if you have to urinate and you're wearing 6 layers of clothes. And it's so cold, you have to do it every 2 hours. But it's cold, it's wet, water is close to freezing. Once I decided to take bath, in Southern Ocean, I poured a bucket of water and I completely froze. I poured a bucket of seawater. I completely froze. For 50 days, I did not take bath after that. So, you should go to the Southern Ocean once in your life on a sailboat. And if you come back, if you are able to come back, you will never face a problem on land. But Southern Ocean is the second most difficult place in the planet. The most difficult place is any city with people in it.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say something like that.